again, my name is Meredith Reichschneider. I'm a PhD candidate in archaeology at Stanford University. This is my second year excavating and doing archaeological research on the island, but I think my fifth or sixth summer spent on St. Croix. And I also want to start by introducing my awesome archaeological crew and volunteers. If you guys could just raise your hand. Right there we have Jesse Toon. Yeah, round of applause. And Anya Krieger. Anna Pennebaker. And Katie Phillips. And we also have another individual, Dr. Shane Miller, who has already left the island, but he has been invaluable to this project. He volunteers all of his time, resources. He's been doing all of the mapping at the site for me, so it's just been fantastic. And we have Don and Jeff, who are our local St. Croix volunteers, who have helped me in safety many a time. So I've been doing archaeological research at a state king garden. It is a plantation, former sugar plantation, on the south shore of the island. I've been focusing the majority of the research and the archaeological excavations on the plantation hospital building. What I'm really interested in looking at, and those of you who went to my talk last summer, I'll give a sort of quick and dirty version of this research that I'm interested in. I gave a little more in-depth presentation last summer, but I'm really interested in looking at the Danish healthcare system that was implemented in the early 1800s and how that affected the local populations here, particularly enslaved population that was targeted by all of these healthcare measures. One sort of facet of this healthcare legislation and these healthcare programs that were put in place by the Danish government to keep people working, to keep them alive. This wasn't a humanitarian effort. This had to do with economic factors. Was the building of these plantation hospitals. These were, for the most part, every sugar plantation on St. Croix had a sick house. Hospital is a sort of contemporary modern word for what we call where you sort of confine people who are ill or injured and subject them to medical care. So I've been doing a lot of the focused research on this building here. This gives sort of a very, very brief ownership history of the plantation. It was owned by the McAvoy family for the majority of its functionality as a sugar plantation. I did a little bit of archival research in Denmark, in Copenhagen this past spring. I did find an inventory, a tax record that mentions the sick house, and it's quote unquote, a building containing a sick house, stable, and storage area. And this is really interesting because it alludes to the sort of multifunctionality of this building. It wasn't specifically to house sick or injured or enslaved people, but it was also like a place where animals were being kept, a workshop, also a place where animals were being housed. And there is a lot of archaeological evidence of this, which I'll get to in a moment. And this is a map of the entire site. These little red dots here indicate small excavation units that we placed across the site to sort of get a general idea of the distribution of artifacts and the types of artifacts that we're getting. Here's the plantation hospital building, right here, and the excavations were taking place right sort of in the back of the building. Okay, so here's a photo of some of the volunteers excavating in front of this building. Last summer, when we were doing work here, it was maybe the second to last week, of course, we came down on an extensive trash deposit right in front of the building. And this is really, really invaluable for archaeological research in the sense that it gives a really great picture of disposal patterns, how people are getting rid of their trash, what they're eating, what types of ceramics they're using, and it gives a really clear picture of the sort of day-to-day life that's associated with the use and occupation of this building. We have another photo here. That's Dr. Shane Miller of Mississippi State University. You can see, the lights are a little bright, but you can see in here all of these little things that are coming up. This is all artifacts, so this is really an artifact-rich area. And then we have Anya working with two future archaeologists, hopefully. And so the artifacts that we're getting out of this building are interesting in the sense that we don't have a lot of stuff coming out of here that we associate with, like, say, Western medical science or Western medical practice, which is not entirely surprising. For the most part, physicians would, like European trained physicians, would not be working or visiting these establishments very often because this costs money to the plantation owner. And so the picture we're sort of getting through a lot of this preliminary artifact analysis from the stuff that we got last summer and this summer is that this is a place where people were living, and we don't know how long people were interred in these places, but it's a lot of just sort of domestic refuse. So these are all ceramics. The ceramic assemblage is associated with, like, serving different kinds of food. Most of them are bowls and cups. I think almost 90% of the ceramic assemblage is bowls and cups. And as archaeologists, one way we get at foodways is, like, the types of ceramics that we find at a site. This would indicate that people are eating and drinking, like, liquid-based diets. So probably a lot of stews, a lot of soups, teas. We have a lot of clothing remnants because clothing itself, like fabric, doesn't preserve in the archaeological record. What we're left with is buttons, clothing clasps, hooks, stuff like that. A lot of these buttons, and afterwards we have them all set on that table. You guys can come up and look at them. But these buttons are all made from animal bone, and they were being made at the site, at this building. We have a lot of the button blanks, so either buttons that were never finished or that were broken while they were being made. And we also have these medicine bottles. We colloquially call them medicine bottles. We don't know exactly what their purpose was. They probably were used to hold either alcohol or other medicinal products. And this was pre-patent medicine, so when you think of, like, earlier 1800s medicine bottles, those do not exist in this context. And then there's a lot of interesting other stuff going on. Lots and lots of horseshoes, bits of tack from horse bridles. We have lots and lots of barrel straps, presumably from rum barrels. And then a lot of architectural debris. I mean, bags and bags and bags and bags of wrought iron nails. And so this is a little bit of a very short version of some of the artifact analysis that I have completed to date. We have over 3,000 individual artifacts. That's not counting the stuff that we have from this summer's excavations. Another way that archaeologists can look at foodways and what people are eating and how they're eating and how they're processing their animals as they eat them, which is really, really important, both for nutritional purposes, for medicinal purposes. It has a lot to do with specific worldviews. So I've really been trying to focus on all of the animal remains, so the animal bones. This is broken down by species, and this is all of the domesticates. So we have a fair number of chicken, cow, pig. It's really hard to tell the difference between sheep and goat, so we call them sheep-goat, which is predominant in the assemblage, rodent, and then just mammals divided by size. And there's also quite a bit of marine species that we were finding in the Midden deposit. A lot of fish bone. The only ones I've been able to identify so far are parrotfish, so that's really interesting. People were taking advantage of the marine resources. The site itself is on the coast. We also have a lot of fishing weights in the assemblage, which we can garner from that people were probably actively fishing on the coast. Okay, and finally, this gives a breakdown of the parts of the body that people were eating and processing. So all of the bones have been processed very, very, very extensively. They all have chop marks in them. Again, we'll be at the table later and you guys can come up and see the bones. And a lot of the times people do that to sort of maximize the nutritional content of the bones. If you break them down and cook them for lengthy periods of time, you can draw all the fat and the nutrients out of the bones. We have a lot of, like, limb elements, so feet, hindquarters, forequarters, not very many elements of the midsection or of the head, which is sort of the more prized cuts of meat. The feet are sort of not something that the plantation owner manager is probably eating. It's probably stuff that's left over from the butchering process that's being rationed. And finally, we've been looking at some of the plant remains from the excavations. The way in which we do that is we basically wet screen and wash all of the dirt that we excavate, and then it gets sent off to a specialist who can pull all the sort of carbonized or the burnt seeds that remain in the soil and identify them at the species level. There's a lot of grass, which is not entirely surprising. Purslane, amaranth, and smartweed are the species that we've been able to identify so far. I think this is really interesting because these are all weed species that grow sort of natively, well, they're not native, that's the wrong word, wild, non-domesticates, on the island, and these serve a variety of sort of nutritional purposes. They can also be turned to serve medicinal purposes across the Caribbean, across North America, Southeast Asia. So I think that it's really interesting that at this site, I went into it thinking that, we were going to be finding like syringes, medicine bottles, like these things that are associated with Western medical care and sort of biomedicine, and this is not really the case. This is not really what's going on at this establishment. We do know that physicians were visiting here and taking care of people here. I found the physicians all of his yearly annual reports that talk about all of the treatments that he was giving people at King Garden. It's 30 years worth. So we know that there was some intervention in medical care there, but the sort of day-to-day care was provided most likely by an enslaved woman who was charged with taking care of people in this establishment. And then I think that medicine and healing and healthcare has a lot more to do with nutrition and caring than it does with, say, like the application of specific medications or treatments. So hopefully that didn't go over too much. I tried to do fast. And I want to thank, this is my thank you, I want to thank again all of the volunteers that have worked on this project. You guys are indispensable. Also the local SHPO, NPS. And as a side note, I also have cards up here with my email contact information, but I do have a website. It exists, it's not up yet, but it's just mreichschneider.com. And I'm working on it, and it will be ready to go. I'll do like weekly blogs, I'll have updates of all the site photos, all the analysis information as it comes in. So if anyone's interested, go to the site and visit it. And I'm not going to do questions right now for lack of time, but if you want to or have time to stay after Caroline's presentation, me and the staff will be at the table on the side there where we have a lot of the more interesting artifacts from the excavation set out. We'll answer questions about the artifacts, we'll answer questions about the project, so please come up and talk to us after. And thank you.
Welcome. Good evening. Thanks for coming. And thanks to the Friends of St. Croix National Parks for having us, and thanks to NPS for hosting us physically. I am the Marine Park Coordinator for the East End Marine Park, so I work for the Division of Coastal Zone Management within DPNR. And I thought I would just give you guys a tour, but a virtual tour, which will be available on the web after tonight's presentation as a resource for any of you, people visiting St. Croix, etc. It's through ArcGIS Online. GIS is a very expensive program, but recently they've made it available to anybody. So if you like maps and like playing around with spatial data, you can make your own map and your own story map if you want to, which I think is super cool. So let me just zoom out a little bit here. This is the basic map of our park. Unfortunately, St. Croix has faded into the background there. But the park is composed of 4 management zones, and And these zones were conceived essentially to provide for some traditional uses within the park, but also some protected areas in which there is no, or in which human impacts are lessened. Within the reef, you'll see that there are both red and blue zones. The red zone is the no-take zone. The principal difference between the red zone and the blue zone is that there's some fishing activities allowed in the recreation zone. There are no fishing activities allowed in the no-take zone. So spearfishing, fish pots, conking, lobstering, all of that is forbidden in both blue and red zones. There is a line, you can't really see it at this scale, but you can zoom in. This blue line indicates that fishing from the shoreline with a rod and hook is allowed in this shoreline area, and all the way east to Cotton Garden Point on the north shore. And then on the south shore again, the zone starts Grapefruit Point, isn't it, John?
Right.
And goes west. So that's, yes.
How would you like for people to be able to hear you?
Oh no, really?
Yeah, I'm afraid we're gonna have to do this.
But really, nobody's been able to hear me?
Well, I have.
Okay. I'm also not used to speaking in the microphone. So did people at the back hear any of that? Yes? Okay, well, great. So that is the basic overview of the zones and the management activities. I also on this main map, if we zoom back out, there are some notes here about the other jurisdictions. So Buck Island, and it sends you to Buck Island's website to learn about restrictions there. This other handout here is federal waters, and so there are restrictions associated with fishing in those waters. We'll go on to the next slide, which will be about coral reefs. So coral reefs were a main part of the reason for the park's establishment. It was established in 2003. And they are shown here in purple. Park is home to, along with Buck Island, shares the distribution of a couple of critically endangered and endangered, as well as federally listed threatened species of coral and numerous fish species. The Territorial Coral Reef Monitoring Program, which is what these little symbols indicate, happens every year. This year I think it's happening in November, and that's a cooperation. Are you still working? That's a cooperation between CZM and the University of the Virgin Islands. These are sites, there are 33 sites. They are visited every year, and this is a long-term record, essentially, of what's happening to coral communities and fish communities throughout the territory. I've become a big advocate of seagrass. I was sort of like scared of it and confused by it before I started this work. But I really advocate snorkeling in seagrass. A lot of people come to St. Croix specifically to snorkel the coral reefs, but I see a lot of really cool stuff in seagrass. So I encourage you to get out there and just float over it, just see what's going on. I see juvenile fish of all kinds, and they're tiny, they're really sweet. I always see stingrays, I often see turtles. So I encourage you to get out there and go and see. I still dream of the day that I might see a Nassau grouper or a seahorse, because both of those are known to use those areas, although I haven't seen them yet. Have you, Richard?
Plenty of seahorses, yeah.
Really? So mangroves is the next sort of habitat we're going to look at. Can you read any of that? Not really, I suppose. There are 4 principal species of mangrove on St. Croix, or that comprise our mangrove forest on St. Croix. In this photograph is the red mangrove, and those prop roots are really important as a substrate for invertebrates, but also the physical structure they create is a good nursery habitat for a lot of young reef fish, as well as fish that just stay in the mangroves. I've also highlighted on here, there's a program called eBird. We have some very dedicated birders on St. Croix who regularly visit the mangrove areas and other places and record everything that they see. So there's a link here to sighting records that go back a number of years, and you can figure out what you're going to see, verify things that you think you might have seen against those lists. Beaches, so a lot of people also come to St. Croix for beaches. They are a favorite of St. Croix's human population, but they're also very important for nesting sea turtles and also for birds. The data that's shown here is actually courtesy of St. Croix Environmental Association, and this is just an example of some of the information that we've been collecting, or that St. Croix Environmental has been collecting, and that we hope to improve collection within the East End Marine Park on other beaches using a similar methodology. So the legend here just demonstrates the different species, so you can see the distribution of the species. This is just one season, so 2014. The monitoring at Jack, Isaac, and East End Bay is done by the Nature Conservancy. They're our technical partner there. And the Friends, like I said, the Friends of the East End Marine Park are hoping to add other beaches to the portfolio, since we have many beaches and don't know exactly what's going on in terms of turtles on a lot of them. So on this map, I labeled all of the beaches using the Geographic Dictionnaire of the Virgin Islands. If you've never had a look at it, it's a pretty cool but somewhat archaic document that names all kinds of little spots on St. Croix, and actually all over the Virgin Islands. There's a link to it from this slide as well, so check it out if you get a chance. Rocky shores are generally the areas in between the beaches. They often get neglected, but a lot of cactuses live up there. They're also the favorite haunt of brown pelicans. They're diving for fish often. But I thought that was a habitat that gets overlooked. Recreational opportunities. You may have seen that there's a recreational guide, or there were a couple versions of the recreational guide on the table. We're updating that at the moment, but this map is a companion for that, so you can figure out a day out. There's really something for everybody. If it's not actually in the water, it's on the shore near the water. So we've got tennis and golf, three kinds of golf, tons of beaches, good snorkeling sites. So that's what this illustrates. Here's just a quick look at some of our ongoing activities and programs. The photograph here was taken sometime last week. These are kids at our summer camp. This is now the third year that the East End Marine Park has run a summer camp. This year it's for high schoolers, so ages 14 and up. And they're participating in an international program known as Sand Watch, which looks at changing beaches and coastlines. And here they were measuring water currents at Chenet Bay. We have done walking tours at the East End Marine Park for a long time. We recently changed it, or recently adopted a schedule that is synchronized with the equinoxes and the solstices, keeps it easy for us to remember and easy for you to remember. So if you think of it, it will also be in St. Croix this week. And those are typically an hour and a half on a morning. Come out and join us to learn a little bit more about the park. School outreach is ongoing during the year in addition to the summer camp, and that is tailor-made classroom programs or field trips out to Great Pond where they have an interpretive tour. And the last one I wanted to highlight in here is addressing ongoing sources of land-based pollution. There's a project with many partners, they're all listed here, at Green Key and Chenet Bay, which is there's a specific area that's been identified as a high sediment load transport in big rain events. Tons of sediment comes off the land and goes straight into Chenet Bay. So there's an engineering project which will hopefully address that and reduce the amount that's actually being sent into the ocean. This is a spotlight on a project that we have been working on with crabs. I don't know if any of you know the Recreational Dive Club on the island, but they have been very generous to lend their divers and their equipment and their expertise in locating some boats which we know have sunk in the park, but we needed updated information about their location, condition, whether they're still a hazard to navigation. And I wanted to just tell the story of Monique, who is here in these little, she's here, this little red sinking boat. She sank on her mooring in Teague Bay, and then 4 days later she was found a little bit further out. No, that's not going to work. There we go. That was her first location. She was visited again in 2012 by the Division of Fish and Wildlife, the local Fish and Wildlife. And then when we found her, we went looking for her in this vicinity just at the end of May, but we found her all the way over here. And she's now in 4 piles of all kinds of various debris. And the reason we are interested in getting very accurate information about these boats is we're constantly seeking funding for their removal, and it's really important to the funder to be able to justify why you're doing that. But then also, if we're going to recover them, we need to know where they actually are instead of having to go and look for them in needle in a haystack fashion, which is what's happened with one of our other boats, and I'll be speaking to Sandy about that shortly. So the other boats that are on that map, there's like a green dot and a blue dot and a purple dot. Those are other known derelict boats within the park. Oh, that's not right. Okay, so that really brings me to the end of my series of maps. I just wanted to invite you to come see us, come visit the park, see some seagrass. If you want more information or to get involved, I have 2 representatives from the Friends of the East End Marine Park here tonight, and Richard Peel, and Sarah and Richard Peel, and they're here to kind of answer questions about the Friends, and I'm here too. So if you have any questions, let me know. I have information on the right-hand side here. Pencils. There's some coloring of the habitats. There are some beautiful line drawings that make great coloring projects for kids. And pens and pencils, so enjoy.